Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Medlock Post radio show. This is where we educate, entertain, enlighten, and empower. The views and opinions on the Medlock Post radio show are those of the host and guests. They are not necessarily the views and opinions of Blog Talk Radio, Spreaker.com, its corporations, affiliates, or any other podcast streaming services. Thank you for joining the show today, and here is your host, Richard G. Medlock.
That's right, the home of the brave. That's who we are. We the people. We're the home of the brave. That is us. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Richard G. Medlock. We have an important message today on episode 67. And you will probably listen to this several times and to try to understand where we are in America today. The question is there a real constitutional crisis in the United States of America? When you hear that phrase, what comes to your mind? Do you think of the rule of law or the lack of the rule of law? Do you think of the judicial, or do you think of the ruler's law, which is either tyranny or anarchy or both? Do you think of the judicial system and judges who are to make decisions according to the Constitution, or do you think of judges who are activists and try to make new laws on their own? Do you think of government agencies that ignore the rulings of the courts against their actions? Do you think of the oath of office our elected officials take in the absence of carrying out those sworn duties? Or do you think of the duty to protect and defend the Constitution being laid aside by many elected officials so as to grow in power and wealth without being held accountable? If your answer to the questions is in the affirmative, then we are in a constitutional crisis. And why do you think that is so? There are many answers to that question, concerning a constitutional crisis. The Democratic Marxists complain that Trump and the MAGA movement will destroy democracy. Which democracy? We don't have a democracy in the United States. We have a constitutional republic. Notice the Democratic Marxists do not capitalize democracy when they say that or write it. Why? It's their democracy. That's ruled by mob. That's mob rule. Is what it is. Then why is the one world order their democracy? Actually, that is called communism. That's where we are, folks. So let's see if we can cover a few things here. And to give you some preliminaries from our founding fathers and jump into this. Alexander Hamilton insisted that, quote, unjust authority confers no obligation of obedience, unquote. Well, John Locke taught us the same principle. That's where Alexander Hamilton got this. You've heard me read John Locke's quote many times. There is further insight from the founding fathers. Every new generation of human beings seems to feel the instinctive and passionate necessity to reinvent the sociological will, the physical sciences, but the social sciences seldom do. In political and social relations, a single generation will sometimes duplicate the same era half a dozen times. Too many human beings are doing it today. They are muddling their lives with drugs, riots, revolutions, and terrorism, predatory wars, unnatural sexual practices, merry-go-round marriages, organized crime, neglected and sometimes brutalized children, plateau intoxication, debt-ridden prosperity, and all the other ingredients of insanity which have shattered 20 mighty civilizations in the past. These elements of social decay can have a devastating impact on the highly technical and delicately interdependent civilization which freedom and prosperity have brought to mankind. Like I say, you will probably go back and listen to this a few times. Thomas Jefferson taught us this, quote, I have spoken of the Federalists as if they were a homogeneous body. But this is not the truth. Under that name lurks a heretical sect of monarchists. Afraid to wear their own name, they creep under the mantle of federalism, and the Federalists, like sheep, permit the fox to take shelter among them when pursued by dogs. These men have no right to office. If a monarchist be in office anywhere, and it be known to the president, the oath he has taken to support the Constitution imperiously requires the instantaneous dismission of such officer, and I hold the president criminal if he permitted such to remain. To appoint a monarchist to conduct the affairs of a republic is like appointing an atheist to the priesthood. As the real Federalist, I take them to my bosom as brothers. I view them as honest men, friends to the present Constitution, unquote. That was Thomas Jefferson laying it out. Do not let these monarchists, do not let these communists, do not let these globalists into our system. But sadly, that has happened. Drift toward the collectivist left. The founding fathers warned against the welfare state, where the government endeavors to take care of everyone from the cradle to the grave. Thomas Jefferson wrote, quote, "If we can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of them, they must become happy," unquote. They warned against confiscatory taxation and deficit spending. Jefferson said it was immoral for one generation to pass on the results of its extravagance in the form of debts to the next generation. He wrote, unquote, "We shall all consider ourselves unauthorized to saddle prosperity with our debts and morally bound to pay them ourselves, and consequently, within what may be deemed the period of a generation or the life expectancy of the majority," unquote. Basically, he's saying, pay your own dang bills. Government, don't go in debt. Individuals, families, don't go in debt. If you do, pay it off before it's passed on to your heirs. Can anybody think of student loan forgiveness here? Yeah, I thought you might be thinking of that. And I'm sure a lot of things are going through your minds right now. Yeah, let's strike a nerve with you. Let's get those synapses firing in your brain and start thinking about this situation. The founders also warned that the only way for the nation to prosper was to have equal protection of rights and not allow the government to get involved in trying to provide equal distribution of things. They also warned against the pooling of property as advocated by the proponents of communism. Samuel Adams said that they had done everything possible to make the ideas of socialism and communism unconstitutional. Do you understand that? Freedom is first and foremost and should be protected, along with all the other rights. This is what Samuel Adams, this is his said, quote, "The utopian schemes of leveling redistribution of the wealth in a community of goods, central ownership of the means of production and distribution are as visionary and impractical as those which vest all property in the crown. These ideas are arbitrary, despotic, and in our government unconstitutional," unquote. The founding fathers were very clear, and the reasons why the things were put in it. And to do away with arbitrary, despotic, and unconstitutional things, especially socialism and communism. America was created as a nation of Judeo-Christian morality, morality of the Ten Commandments, morality of individual freedoms, morality of the Golden Rule, not doing to others of what we do not want to be done to us. And those things work. Many of the Founding Fathers' warnings that could cause a constitutional crisis have been brought forth in the last several decades in America. All right, how's your thought process going here, folks? Call-in number is 563-999-3676. The monarchist form of government has slowly crept into our system of government, not only at the federal level, but at the state and local level. We can include school boards and teachers' unions in that list, and sadly, many major corporations. The monarchist ideology is showing itself as the one world order or globalist ideology. we need to mention the administrative state of government, by which laws, rules, and many regulations are created and enforced without ever going through the halls of Congress. The Supreme Court of the United States has ruled against many of these false creations, but are ignored by the administrative states. I mean, we just had a ruling a couple of weeks ago. The court ruled that DACA is illegal. And what's the Biden administration doing? They're changing some of the rules so they can keep going. It's still illegal. It was ruled illegal 3 or 4 times under Obama. They kept doing it. And it's still ruled again unconstitutional under Trump. And he stopped it, or tried to. And then, of course, the floodgates are open now. I want to read this quote. What actions concerning the economy are creating a constitutional crisis? Let me start with this quote. I'm not going to tell you who said this or when. Just listen to the quote. For the great enemy of the truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, and dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic. Too often we hold fast to the cliches of our forebearers. We subject all facts to a prefabricated set of interpretation. We enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought. We enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought. Continuing with the quote. Mythology distracts us everywhere. The government, as in business, in politics, as in economics, in foreign affairs, as in domestic affairs. But today, I want to particularly consider the myth and reality in our national economy. In recent months, many have come to feel, as I do, that the dialogue between the parties, between business and government, between the government and the public, is clogged by illusion and platitude and fails to reflect the true realities of contemporary American society. There are 3 great areas of our domestic affairs in which today there is a danger that illusion may prevent effective action. They are, first, question of the size and the shape of the government's responsibilities. Second, the question of public fiscal policy. And third, the matter of confidence, business confidence or public confidence, or simply confidence in America, unquote. Now, you're probably thinking Ronald Reagan said this, or Donald Trump said this, or a great economist said this, like Milton Friedman, or Stephen Moore, or Art Laffer. But you would be wrong. John Kennedy, President John Kennedy, on June 11th, 1962, this was from his commencement address at Yale University, which he was a graduate. You ought to go read that speech. This is from that. What he says in 1962 is just as today. And I want to go back to just the opening sentence. For the great enemy of truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, and dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic. Think of climate change, climate crisis. That is a myth that has been promoted for over 50 years. And 30, 40 predictions of dire consequences, or the earth ending, or ice age, or boiling over, or the oceans rising, have yet to happen. The myth. The more they put that out there, the more people are going to believe it. They just keep saying it. And other things. I mean, we could list probably a whole page full of things that they lie to us about today. But we need to continue. Yes, that was 1962, before political correctness or wokeness was spoken of. But Congress learned how to get wealthy and powerful from legislation and regulations they passed and put into place. It was in its infancy and grew from there. Now, let's discuss the three areas John Kennedy brought up. A constitutional crisis, folks. Okay, first, the question of the size and the shape of the government's responsibilities. The United States Constitution is very clear as to the responsibilities of the federal government. Establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now, what's hard about that, folks? That's in the preamble of the Constitution. Let's break these down. To establish justice to all on an equal basis, regardless of race, sex, religion, political belief, or one's financial or societal status. Today in America, we do not see that equal justice the Founding Fathers created to build a great nation and to maintain a great nation. We see federal legal enforcement agencies used as political enforcers to pursue political opponents and their supporters to the point of imprisonment or frivolous lawsuits. We see individuals and families arrested for no reason at all except to intimidate others of like mind to remain silent. We see parents put on a so-called domestic terrorist list simply for opposing school boards that are forcing critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion theory, transgender ideology, and awful sexual habits on students by promoting pornography. We see the government threaten schools that if they do not teach the government's transgender classes, they will withhold federal money for school lunches. Let's take a look at some justice coming out of the Army, or injustice, we should say. Thousands of soldiers, veterans, slapped with misleading criminal record. One soldier said, "We are branded as criminals. Soldiers never charged with wrongdoing say Army investigation has ruined their careers." A decade after the Army ended a recruiting program embroiled in accusations of fraud and mismanagement, more than 2,400 soldiers who were never charged with wrongdoing are likely shackled by misleading flag on their criminal records. We are branded as criminals, Army Captain Gilberto De Leon told Fox News. There was times where I broke down on my knees, my career ruined, about to lose my pension. How am I going to support my family of 8? Unquote. Soldiers and veterans say they've lost jobs, been denied bank loans or weapons permits, and suffered other consequences because of an obscure Army process that treats anyone who is merely investigated for wrongdoing as guilty. This is our federal government. This is a constitutional crisis. The size of government continues to increase daily. The expansion of 87,000 IRS agents to harass and intimidate, if I could spell, folks, intimidate voters and businesses. The number of federal government agencies is astronomical. To build a manufacturing plant in America, you will need to go through a minimum of 40 to 50 agencies to get permits. This does not include the state and local permits. And you have to pay for every one of those permits. The administrative state continues to apply pressure on businesses, especially the small businesses, with unconstitutional regulations and fees. Banks are being forced to follow the ESG method to those applying for loans, individual, business, and development. ESG stands for environmental, social, and government. Investors are increasingly applying these non-financial factors as part of their analysis process to identify material risk and growth opportunities. There are three pillars of ESG. Environmental. This has to do with an organization's impact on the planet. Social. This has to do with the impact an organization has on people, including staff and customers and the community. Government. This has to do with how an organization is governed. Is it governed transparently? Environmental, social, and governance, ESG investing, refers to a set of standards for a company's behavior based on behavior used by socially conscious investors to screen potential investors. Environmental criteria consider how a company safeguards the environment, including corporate policies addressing climate change, for example, that doesn't exist. Social criteria examine how it manages relationships with employees, suppliers, customers, and the communities where it operates. Governance deals with the company's leadership, executive pay, audits, internal controls, and shareholder rights. All right, I want you to listen to this little over 2-minute soundbite explaining ESG. Now listen to some of the key words that he uses in here.
ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. You can think of it as an analysis framework to help measure and quantify the degree to which an organization is operating in a sustainable manner. Environmental assessment criteria help stakeholders understand an organization's impact on the environment and the climate, like its greenhouse gas emissions, and its management team's stewardship over natural resources, like fresh water. While understanding environmental risk and impact is a big part of the ESG framework, the concept of sustainability in this context extends well beyond just the environment. The S pillar, social, examines an organization's social impact. It seeks to understand how well leadership manages relationships with stakeholders, including fair wages for workers, generating positive outcomes in the communities where they operate, and taking accountability for the actions and inactions of supply chain partners in other parts of the world. The G, as we know, is governance. So, how is the firm led and managed? Stakeholders are increasingly taking note that a healthy corporate governance function can make or break progress in the E and the S realms, but can even create existential threats for business operations more broadly. ESG as we know it evolved from a number of older sustainability-themed acts and frameworks, including EHS, Environmental Health and Safety, and CSR, or Corporate Social Responsibility. But these older frameworks took more of a philanthropic approach, implying that management teams should do good because it's the right thing to do. What's somewhat unique about ESG is that it looks at these issues through the lens of business risk and opportunity. which tends to resonate more clearly with the investment community. These rapidly changing market and non-market conditions have created the ESG landscape as we see it today. This includes the emergence of ESG rating agencies, ESG scores, mandatory public reporting, often called ESG disclosure, and countless sustainability-themed funds and investment strategies.
Kind of interesting, isn't it? He's trying to explain ESG. The word stakeholders was used several times. Not shareholders, stakeholders. Now, who are the stakeholders here? They don't really define that, do they? Shareholders own the stock or bonds. Stakeholders are those that are running the thing and others like that. In this situation, I think it's safe to say the government is a stakeholder, mandating all these new criteria on businesses. And if you don't do them, your score is going to go down. You can't get loans. You can't get federal help in a time of crisis. And banks today are turning down corporations for loans that have always, they have great credit scores. They've always paid their bills, but now their woke credit score is not what it should be. Now, how does a small business keep up with this? Mandate forms to fill out, mandate things to do, costs money, more and more regulations. And let me remind you this, that the ESG system is based on the same social scoring system used by the Chinese Communist Party to have total control of population. You should have known that by now. This is all about control. You run your business the way we want you to run it, or you're not going to survive. That's tyranny. That's Marxism. Second, question of public fiscal policy. Folks, this is almost a joke to even discuss today. The federal government's fiscal responsibility is, now listen carefully, this is their policy: spend, 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 and then spend even more. Do you get that? Just keep printing money, keep spending, run up inflation. We don't care. But let me ask you this. If the government can print money for anything they want, why do we need to pay taxes? Just ask yourself that question. The other question is this. Who do they do all this spending to the benefit of whom? To those in power and for political partners? The national debt now stands over $31 trillion and growing astronomically. We will see $32 trillion before the end of the year. The interest payments alone will blow your mind. With every rise of 1% in interest rates by the Federal Reserve, the interest payments for 1 year increase on the national debt by almost $1 trillion, on top of what they're already paying. The Federal Reserve continues to print money every day that adds to inflation. Under the Biden administration, those policies have increased inflation, increased taxes, and forced many small businesses to close their doors. Add on top of all this, the Biden administration, led by Secretary Janet Yellen, is moving control of America's economy and monetary policy over to the United Nations, the central banks, and the International Monetary Fund. Do we have a constitutional crisis? Then the alleged climate crisis, being used to force you to comply with false regulations that do nothing to help the environment but make a few elites richer. For instance, now this is outside of the United States, but it will come back to us. 20 nations at high risk for global warming might halt debt payments. The countries want their collective $685 billion in debts forgiven so the money can be invested in climate projects. Most of this money came from the International Monetary Fund. Who funds most of the money that's lent by the International Monetary Fund? That's correct, the United States of America. Trump tried to pull out of that, and Congress wouldn't let him. So now these 20 nations, and I'm not going to go through them, they're smaller countries, almost $750 billion, they're saying, hey, no, sorry, we need to protect our country from climate crisis. So we're not going to pay you back. You need to just forgive us. Who's that going to hurt the most? The United States. The latest environmentalist trend is here, pouring out milk in grocery stores. Across the United Kingdom, teenagers concerned about the environment are doing milk pours. The new trend involves going into grocery stores, picking up cartons of cow-produced milk, and pouring out their contents, according to the animal rights group Animal Rebellion. Look for this in the United States, folks. There are eco-extremists out there. Even our government wants to control cow farts, or nicely said, cow flatulence. They think it is ruining the economy or the climate, and it's ruining the economy, they think as well. I saw the other day they want to control cow burps. Folks, common sense. It's not there, but use yours. Use your reason. Look at this. And third, the matter of confidence. Business confidence or public confidence, or simply confidence in America. Is it true that the prosperity of this country depends on the assurance that all major elements within it will live up to their responsibilities? If business were to neglect its obligations to the public, if labor were blind to all public responsibility, if government were to abandon its obvious duty of watchful concern for our economic health, if any of these things should happen, then confidence might well be weakened and the danger of stagnation would increase. This is the true issue of confidence. The American people have lost confidence in the federal government from president on down. They know that we, the people, are not high on their list to protect or watch out for. The knowledge that federal policies are America last is evident to a very large number of voters today, and most Americans. And with an election in 3 weeks, it could be devastating for the Democratic Marxists. Confidence in corporate America is waning. The big tech of social media that controls and prohibits free speech, corporations with woke policies, the phrase "go woke, go broke" is starting to see the light with many woke companies. A good example is Disney. Banks are forcing the ESG ideology on their borrowers and customers. Confidence is waning. Now, let me talk about ensure domestic tranquility. Well, let's look at a definition of that. Referred to the new government's commitment to keep peace within America's borders, provide for the common defense, keep the state safe from the threat of foreign nations, other countries, by ensuring there is a national military, Army, Navy, etc. Okay. The nation tries to ensure domestic tranquility by creating peaceful environments to live in and establishing organizations like the National Guard and the FBI, which the FBI is now a joke among a lot of people. The words ensure domestic tranquility are of prime significance in the preamble. Let us take a closer look at the precise meaning of every word. In the phrase domestic, roughly indicates the country. It indicates anything and everything that occurs within the country, work activities, the society, people's welfare, etc. And we're not talking about welfare that you live off of. Tranquility means peace, calm, protection, law, and safety issues. Ensure implies maintaining, ensuring, or preserving. Thus, to ensure domestic tranquility means to ensure that peace and order, tranquility exist in the country. Now, there's 5 words I want you to hear. And you've heard me say them before. Chaos, division, fear, hatred, and violence. This is the 5 words that the domestic Marxists, the communists, and the globalists live by. They want to create all 5 of these. Chaos, division, fear, hatred, and violence. Now, let's take a look at some other things here. Are we in a constitutional crisis? Excuse me. How about defund the police? Does that sound like the government is trying to ensure domestic tranquility? BLM and Antifa and other organizations are allowed to roam the streets at will to loot, burn, and kill without interference by the police, National Guard, or anybody else. Does that sound like ensuring domestic tranquility? Drug cartels are in control of the southern border, and the Border Patrol has had their hands tied by Joe Biden's administration. Human trafficking is netting drug cartels $200 to $300 million per week in charging fees to bring migrants to the border. Fentanyl is flooding the United States and killing hundreds of thousands of people. Does that sound like ensuring domestic tranquility? Sex trafficking is rampant in the United States. The Democratic Marxists voted down a bill to increase jail sentences for sex offenders a couple of months ago. Does that sound like ensuring domestic tranquility? Marijuana and other illegal drugs are being overlooked and not prosecuted. Cities are losing businesses over these decisions. Is this ensuring domestic tranquility? No bail rules, releasing murderers and other felons, rising crime rates. Is that ensuring domestic tranquility or equal justice? The Democratic Marxists want to ignore the Second Amendment and take away your guns. There's a liberal dark money network quietly launches a gun group to create narrative that guns make us less safe. Project Unloaded, housed in Arabella Advisors' dark money network, recruited social media influencers to push anti-gun messaging. Does that sound like ensuring domestic tranquility? I know what you're saying out there. There's a longer list. So Project Unloaded. I wonder who's really funding that. Is George Soros funding that? Is Planned Parenthood funding that through their government donations? Is our own government, through all their multiple agencies, funding Project Unloaded? Joe Biden took a working and strict border policy left to him by Donald Trump and turned it into a humanitarian disaster. Millions of illegal immigrants from countries around the world are pouring into the United States, and nobody is stopping them. And many of them are dying along the way. Biden's decision to do away with border enforcement has also greatly facilitated the smuggling of tons of drugs into the country, including deadly fentanyl from China that is killing many unsuspecting Americans. This violation of the Constitution by not upholding the oath to ensure domestic tranquility is costing the American taxpayers billions of dollars per month. Biden took an energy-independent country and turned it into a nation begging Saudi Arabia and Venezuela for oil. Gasoline prices hit the roof, and inflation soared and continues to go up. Biden forgot how he preened on day one of his presidency, launching his war on domestic produced energy in favor of his green dream of a fossil fuel free world. Really? Yes, he did. He campaigned on this. Yes, the world may come to an end. Biden and John Kerry, his climate change czar, which is a communist name, Obama introduced that, and the progressive Marxists would have you believe that the world will come to an end unless their anti-fossil fuel agenda is adopted. Yes, the world may come to an end, but the chances are the end will come sooner from the unleashing of nuclear weapons than it will come from the use of fossil fuels. That's right, common sense. This unconstitutional policy has lowered the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to unheard of lows and becomes a critical national security threat and risk. And Biden continues to lower the SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Selling oil from the SPR to our enemy China is an act of treason according to the Constitution. It's called aiding and abetting our enemies. Look it up, folks. It's in the Constitution. Forcing energy companies to sell to whom the government allows to sell is Marxist tyranny. In the Federalist 47, James Madison explained this, quote, "When the legislative and executive powers are united in the same person or body, there can be no liberty because apprehensions may arise at least the same monarch or Senate should enact tyrannical laws to execute them in a tyrannical manner, or the power of judging joined with this legislative, the life and liberty of the subject would be exposed to arbitrary control, for the judge would then be the legislator. Were it joined by the executive power, the judge might behave with all the violence of an oppressor, unquote. Well, folks, we can take that quote from Federalist 47 by James Madison and break that down. We don't have time today. Break that down and explain how this has happened in the United States Congress, judges, and executive branch, the judicial branch, how this has happened. That could be another show. We are seeing this today in America through presidential executive orders, rulings by activist judges, and legislations that are all unconstitutional in all nature. We should always ask the question, quote, what principle or principles of the Constitution of the United States does this new bill apply to, unquote. Yes, that's my question. The answers should be very simple. If it does not apply to constitutional principles, or if it doesn't apply, then the bill is dead. So does this new bill apply to constitutional principles, or does it not apply? If it doesn't, it's dead. It should not go on. In the Federalist 39, James Madison again explained it in this way, quote, the first question that offers itself is whether the general form and aspect of the government be strictly Republican. Remember, I said earlier, we are a republic, we are not a democracy. So if a bill does not fall under that republic or the constitutional principles and falls under democracy, then it's not a good bill. Back to the quote. It is evident that no other form would be reconcilable with the genius of the people of America, with the fundamental principles of the Revolution, or would that honorable determination which animates every votary of freedom to rest all our political experiments on the capacity of mankind for self-government. Plan of the convention, therefore, be found to depart from the Republican character. Its advocates must abandon it as no longer defensible, unquote. Federalist 39. I keep telling you people, my listeners and everybody else, read the Federalist Papers. Study them, just as ardent as you would study the Constitution. That's where we get our power as we, the people. By that knowledge, powers us to defend it. Now, back to the original question. Is the United States having a constitutional crisis? The only logical and reasonable conclusion that can be arrived at is yes, we are having a constitutional crisis in America. It's right in front of our faces and becoming more and more evident every day as the administrative state and the Democratic Marxists and the Republican Socialists step out and lie to us with a forked tongue, telling us things that are myths, a myth, like I quoted earlier. They are myths, and they keep saying them. Open our minds, do our homework, think for yourself. Now, what are some things that we can do to bring this to a halt? Well, one, in 3 weeks, go vote Republican everywhere in 3 weeks. If you haven't registered to vote, you're left out now. It's too late. Vote, folks. Vote the Democratic Marxists out of office. The Great American Revival of 2022. I came up with this a couple of months ago. I did it on a previous program, and I've added some things to this. Many media pundits and politicians like to refer to the Great Global Reset when they talk about plans to destroy the American way of life. Now, they won't word it that way, but that's what they're talking about. But instead of talking about that reset, our conversations and actions should focus on the Great American Revival. America and we the people need to return to the basics. Remember the phrase we used to use all the time? KISS, K-I-S-S. Keep it simple, stupid. But that way of thinking needs to return because it proved to be very successful in planning, understanding, and progress. When ideas and discussions become too complicated, confusing, and chaos develop. Unfortunately, that's where we are in America today, and many believe by design. Here are 10 ways, because I added one this morning, that we the people can successfully bring about the Great American Revival. 1. Commandments. They are as meaningful today as when Moses received them on the Mount. By applying them in our lives, we will find strength to fight the good fight. Take the time to ponder how these laws and principles have been perverted and ignored. Then think of ways how they can become a stronger influence in American society today. 1. You shall have no other gods before me. 2. You shall make no idols. 3. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. 4. Keep the Sabbath day holy. 5. Honor your father and your mother. 6. You shall not murder. 7. You shall not commit adultery. 8. You shall not steal. 9. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. 10. You shall not covet. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, all of these are being violated by the secularists around the world, not just in America. Secularists have created a society of barbarians within us. And you say that's strong language. Yes, it is. But to have no regard for human life, to want to kill the baby in your body just because you don't want it, that's barbarism. 2, parents, make your children and family a high priority in your life. The home is the most effective place to learn the lessons of life, truth, honor, virtue, self-control, the value of education, honest work, and the purpose and privilege of life. Nothing can take the place of home in rearing and teaching children, and no other success can compensate for failure in the home, unquote. David O. McKay. He said this in the 1950s, and it's true today. Lessons of life, truth, honor, virtue, self-control, the value of education, honest work, and the purpose and privilege of life. These are taught in the home. We know what the schools are teaching. They're indoctrinating, turn our children into zombies. Number 3, study and understand the United States Constitution. Know and understand where our freedoms come from and how we can successfully defend them. Quote, the present Constitution is the standard to which we are to cling. Under its banners, bona fide must we combat our political foes, rejecting all changes, but through the channel itself provides for amendments. Alexander Hamilton. and unquote. Alexander Hamilton. That's our guide, along with the Bible. When we, the people, hold up the Constitution to tyranny, the Constitution and America win. That's my quote. Four, follow the admonition of the Founding Fathers. There's an old adage that says, quote, a people must from time to time refresh themselves at the wellspring of their origin, lest they perish, unquote. And perish, there's a lot of people right now that want to see America perish. 5, maintaining our freedoms should be a high priority. Peter Marshall said, quote, we may think of freedom not to do as we please, but an opportunity to do what is right, unquote. An opportunity to do what is right. Number 6, do not allow the enemies of America and freedom to dominate the debate. John Kennedy said the same thing. Disregard those myths that are being put out there. Patrick Henry says, quote, is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death, unquote. Be the louder voice for freedom, virtue, values, and moral principles. We, the people, are the louder voice. There are more of us than there are of them. The media wants you to think we are a minority. We are the majority. The louder voice for freedom, virtue, values, and moral principles. Because that's how we live our lives, and we want that freedom to continue to do that. Number 7, stand up against undesirable elected persons and elect moral people. Today we have become a nation of rule by man. It has been said that many political leaders think they know more than God. When men become a law unto themselves, only evil will prevail. This is not the American way. Our founding fathers warned us of this happening and gave us the way to correct the problem. Paine said, quote, a body of men holding themselves accountable to nobody ought not to be trusted by anybody, unquote. And sadly, we have many men and women in office that fit this definition, that we should not trust one bit. Number 8, place providence or God at the head of our families, councils, schools, courts, and assemblies. John Quincy Adams said, quote, from the day of the Declaration, the American people were bound by the laws of God, which they all, and by the laws of the gospel, which they nearly all acknowledged as the rules of their conduct, unquote. They did know that. I did an episode about that. Public virtue, private virtue, individual virtue. And that's what it took for the colonists to finally come to that point, so they felt like that they could self-govern themselves. And it took 3 years up until 1776 to get to that point. And that's what John Quincy Adams is talking about here. When they got to that point of the day of the Declaration, the American people were bound by the laws of God. And we should carry that forward. Number 9, develop and maintain a high degree of hope. America, folks, is not lost. Who and what is lost are the leaders elected to govern and those that have decided to follow a false ideologies. America is still standing because of faithful we the people. Never, never give up on America. Never. Number 10, follow the Constitution of the United States. Yes, follow it. Live it. It's our rule to govern us. We can revive America only if we follow the rule of law. Be obedient to the law of the Constitution and the laws of God. That has and is always the winning formula. And America is made up of winners. We, the people, are winners. America is at war with forces to destroy good and right. Our battles are moving forward and gaining ground as more Americans have decided to stand up and speak up, and I can add, do something. Thomas Paine was correct when he said, quote, "Those who expect to reap the blessings of freedom must, like men, undergo the fatigue of defending it," unquote. Yes, it is tiring. It is fatiguing. It is trying. But that's what we have to go through to maintain our freedoms and our rights. We, the people, are the defenders of freedom, liberty, and justice. We must decide to grow weary or become fatigued in the good fight. Carry on with strength and foresight, ladies and gentlemen. Now let's listen to the battle hymn of the Republic. That'll stir your soul. I hope you didn't think that was the last. No, we're not through yet. No. We've got one more thing to play. And I'm going to keep playing this and keep playing it because it gives us the message that we need to hear. It's called We the People. Now, this was done. You can't find it out there anywhere. I accidentally found it in my recordings from my previous radio show. And I went and looked for it out there, and you can't find it. Now, if you want a copy of that, email me at medlockpost@gmail.com, and I'll send you a link to it. Now, that was the United States Marching Field Band, United States Army Marching Field Band. Now, this next thing is called We the People. Now, she starts out, she addresses Mr. Obama, but it's still pertinent to us today in everything that's said here. And, of course, listen to the background music, and you'll see.
Dear President Obama, we, the people, have stated resolutely we reject your vision for our country. You claim you have not heard us. We, the people, have assembled across America resisting your efforts to subvert our Constitution and undermine our liberty. You claim you have not seen us. Since you have not acknowledged our message, let us here present it once more. For if, as President Wilson said, a leader's ear must ring with the voices of the people, the time has come. Our greatest treasure is freedom, the absence of restraints on our ability to think and to act. The corollary of freedom is individual responsibility. We believe in the power of the individual. A few years ago, President Bush said, "History moves toward freedom because the desire for freedom is written in every human heart." Let us add that we will preserve it only as long as devotion to freedom is expressed in the heart of our actions. When President Lincoln dedicated Gettysburg National Cemetery, he declared, "It is for us, the living, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so nobly advanced." That unfinished cause for which our soldiers willingly go to battle and for which so many have given their lives is a free United States of America. It has been nearly 150 years, and the work President Lincoln spoke of is not finished. In fact, that work will never be finished. Freedom is the capacity for self-determination. It is not an entity, but a condition, and conditions change. Freedom can expand, yet so can it contract. You promised change when you took office, Mr. President, but subjugation is not change we wanted or will accept. You have expanded government, violated our Constitution, confounded laws, seized private industry, destroyed jobs, perverted our economy, curtailed free speech, corrupted our currency, weakened our national security, and endangered our sovereignty. By compromising our nation's cultural, legal, and economic institutions, you are ensuring that our children will never achieve the same quality of life as we enjoy today. Through generational theft, you are robbing the unborn of opportunity. This is not acceptable, not in America. We did not become a strong nation through hope, but rather through self-reliance. No one better understands the relationship between individual achievement, dignity, and strength than our armed forces. Through every war, our soldiers have held this nation's destiny in their hands. They have not failed us. They cherish freedom enough that they are willing to die for it. Our duty to them and to ourselves is to treasure freedom enough to live up to it. We accept the challenge, Mr. President. That is why we are assembling across the land to deliver our message to you as often and in every way we can. Dismiss us at your political peril. Our great nation is a republic. We will not accept tyranny under any guise. Your policy to redistribute the fruits of our labor is sadism and will not be tolerated. By our honor, Mr. President, we vow forever to resist coercive government in America. Patriots will not stand silent as you attempt to dismantle the greatest nation on earth. We, the people, will defend our liberty. We will protect our beloved country, and America's exceptionalism will prevail. God bless the United States of America. Sincerely, we, the people.
We, the people. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Battle Hymn of the Republic and We, the People. Everything she said in there that was happening under Obama is happening today and even more. And we, the people, are the defenders of freedom, liberty, and justice. We must decide not to grow weary or become fatigued in the good fight. Carry on with strength, foresight, and prayer. And like she said, by our honor will we defend freedom. And even as our soldiers will give up their lives, and Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. This is where we are today in America. We can save America. What's lost is Washington, D.C. The people are not lost. Percentage of them are, but not all of them like the media wants us to believe. Our next episode, episode 68, we're going to talk about how we arrived at this constitutional crisis. Now, I talked about things today of what's going on today that's causing this constitutional crisis. But some things had to be put in place to get to there. So the next episode, that's what we're going to talk about. What are the things? I'm going to go back 100 years, folks, or more, and talk about how we came to this situation in America. All right. That's where we are today, folks. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in, listening at the recording later, for your comments. And this is America, the greatest land on earth. God has provided in so many ways for this land and its people. And we need to recognize that. Pray to your God, our God, to continue to protect us and to bless this great land. God bless America.